Hey everybody, it's Matt. This is the 10-Minute Bible Hour podcast. And I think I told you a while back that I watched a show. It was an Amazon Prime show, and it was called The Expanse. It was based on a series of novels. It's a sci-fi space thing. It's okay if you don't remember anything about that. It really made an impression on me, though, when it came out. And my wife watched it even with me, which is a big deal because it's sci-fi. That's not really her thing. And I felt like there's something going on here. There's a lot of layers to this that are more complex. I mean, this is rooted in something. The person who wrote this, they know what they're doing. And then get this. The other day, I'm preparing to talk about, I don't remember, something from last week, casting lots or whatever we were talking about. No. It's the update episode that I did where I brought us back up to speed on the history stuff. I was looking at the life of Artaxerxes, and one of the huge rebellions that he had to put down, it was an Egyptian rebellion. Never thought about it before, right? And then I go and I look a little bit closer because I'm just getting distracted and it's interesting and I actually like this stuff and this is actually what I think about and do when we're not hanging out together. And I see that the name of the dude, this is all about to come together, it's going to blow your mind. The name of the dude who was leading the rebellion in Egypt, the biggest rebellion that the Persians ever faced, his name was Inaros. And the bad guy who led the big rebellion that was the biggest rebellion in space that had ever happened in the Expanse, his name's Marco Inaros. And I'm like, dang, I knew that was a callback to something. Those people who made the Expanse are super clever. Have you ever had that happen? Where you're just watching something or listening to something or whatever, and you see echoes, you detect these echoes in the story, and you're like, nah, I know that's from somewhere. Or maybe you immediately recognize it, and maybe sometimes you even have to do the thing where you debate with yourself, where you're thinking, like, was that intentional? Is that some sort of narrative homage to this other thing that I'm supposed to catch, and it will help me better interpret and understand all the depth of layers of meaning of the thing that I'm watching right now? Or is it just a happy little accident? It's just this beautiful little thing that just happened to occur, and maybe you're the only one who ever caught it. Well, there's a lot of those that come up in the Bible, and I don't think very many of them are happy little accidents. I think that pretty much any time you see something that looks like a narrative rhyme or a narrative callback to something else, you discover that it's supposed to be there. It is supposed to echo something. These stories that almost feel like kind of one-offs as you read through the Bible, they're not one-offs. They're all compounding on each other. And the fact that all of these little callbacks and throwbacks happen and that they do seem to line up thematically, I think points to a much bigger theme about the whole Bible in general, which is just that the character of the God who is purported to be behind all of it is very, very steady. You're dealing with the same God, the God who is sovereign over all of these things, and a God who is so powerful that thousands of years before whatever story you're looking at in the Bible, he did another thing, knowing full well that thousands of years later, it would rhyme with this future event that's going to occur, and that multiple layers of meaning, a better understanding of what was going on, is going to echo there as well. I think we're getting one of those situations in Esther chapter 3, as we're starting to learn more about what the details are of this genocidal plan that this bad guy Haman, who we just met a few verses ago, and now he already wants to kill all the Jews, this plan that he's putting together. And so this Haman guy, you'll recall, he got honored in the place where you would think Mordecai the Jew would get honored for protecting the king, but I guess the king spaced it, and so instead he spaced. If you've seen The Expanse, you know that was a pun that kind of works there. But you have to also believe me that I didn't mean to do that. And if you know, you know. If you don't, you don't. We're going to be just fine. And so the king spaces off and forgets to appoint Mordecai the Jew to give him some kind of reward. Instead, he rewards Haman. Is Mordecai ever going to be rewarded? Will that come into play later? I don't know. And Haman immediately is like, everybody has to bow down to me. That's the rule. And the king's like, sure, great. That should be a rule. Everybody has to do it. That's a royal decree. But then Mordecai doesn't do it. Haman gets mad. It doesn't immediately come to his attention. But when it does, he gets really, really mad. And he's like, it's not enough for me to just kill this one Jew who won't bow to me. I'm going to get them all. And so he decides to consult fate through the use of the poor, the die. And he gets together with some diviners, court magicians, or just pals, I don't know what. And they commit to say, whatever we roll on this dice, that's going to be when we make our move. And we kill all the Jews. And a crazy stroke of luck happens, in that when they cast the poor, it is, if I understand correctly, it's right around the time of the Jewish celebration of the Passover. But when they roll the dice a bunch, cast lots, however they do it, what they come up with for when they're going to execute their genocidal plan is basically at the beginning of next year's Passover. So it's the best possible result if you're a people group that doesn't want to get genocided, because it's the furthest out it could possibly be. And it's the worst possible result that fate gave you if you really want to genocide a people group as quickly as possible, but fate said you got to wait a whole year. So all of that goes down. It looks like this Haman guy is going to honor the deal he made with fate. And so he circles that date on the calendar. There we go. And just put that right there in the month of Adar. And then he goes back over to the king, with whom he has all this currency. Remember, the most lucrative, the most valuable currency, the most valuable commodity in the Persian Achaemenid Empire is access to the king of lands, the king of kings. And Haman has that in spades now, more than anybody else, more than even our hero, our heroine, Queen Esther. And this is what we get in Esther 3. I'm sorry, it's dark. Verse 6 says, Then Haman said to King Xerxes, Hey, there's a certain people dispersed and scattered among the peoples in all the provinces of your kingdom whose customs are different from those of all the other people and who don't obey the king's laws. It's not in the king's best interest to tolerate them. If it pleases the king, let a decree be issued to destroy them, and I'll put 10,000 talents of silver into the royal treasury for the men who carry out this business. Now, at this point, you'd expect the king to be like, what? Okay, yeah, I was with you on the part about like people disobeying my laws and everything, but were you just going to kill all of them? Because that seems like a lot, and I have a ton of things on my schedule today, and I'm not sure I have time for genocide right now. But instead what you get is, so the king took his signet ring from his finger and gave it to Haman, son of Hammedatha, the Agagite, the enemy of the Jews. And keep the money, the king said to Haman, and do with the people as you please. He's just inattentive. He just doesn't care. He's just making decisions. He circles the date as well. And apparently this plan is now in motion with 11 months to go before this thing happens. So now we've got the ticking time bomb motif. We have a time tension here in the book of Esther, which for those of you who like to think real hard about why the stories that work, you will note that the stories that have a time element, we got to sort this out by then, those tend to be the ones that we enjoy the most. But we got this thing here that's a callback. I mean, think about it. This kind of sounds like the deal that we got back in the book of Exodus when the king becomes concerned about the babies. We're getting to have too many of these Jewish babies. You remember this, right? It's from Exodus chapters 1 and 2. And there's just getting to be too many slaves, and it's a problem. And so the Pharaoh, the king, if you will, of Egypt, he issues this decree to execute, to kill all of the male Hebrew babies. But the way he phrases it is that if anybody sees a baby, they're supposed to throw it in the river. And it's really hard for me to deliver that line without sounding like the characters from the video that I made about that. I did a press conference where the person who works for Pharaoh had to go and announce this to the press corps to try to put lipstick on that policy. It's very hard for me to mentally separate that character from how I phrase those things from Exodus. But one of the key real twists of the knife, one of the darkest parts of that other or another genocidal moment in the history of the Old Testament directed at the Jews or the Hebrew people, one of the real twists of the knife is that it's not even like soldiers are going to do it. It's just your neighbors. And so if there's some mom there and she's Jewish, she's a Hebrew lady, she's nursing her baby, and then like Linda and Terry go by on their afternoon jog and they really need to keep their heart rates up, but saw a Jewish baby. I am so sorry, but it is the law. And like the government said, and it's very important to obey the government, Romans 13 and all. Could we just have that for a second? It's their job to throw the baby in the river. It's so dehumanizing and dark. And what you're doing is you're making a law in such a way that it forces everybody to own the evil of the thing so that they've shed blood. And once you've shed blood, you have to be right about what you shed blood about. That's how thought contagions work. And so it's not just that it's a way to execute a genocide that gets the genociding done. It's a way to do it such that you use human psychology and conscience and ethics and a sense of guilt or self-justification against your citizenry to have them carry out this evil on your behalf, but also own it, delight in it, find verbal justifications for it moving forward. This is really dark stuff. And did you catch it? And look, of course, we've got a ton more to break down about this exchange between Haman and Xerxes, and we'll get to that later. But did you catch it? Here's why it rhymes, going back to all the stuff that we talked about with the Naros and stories that rhyme and build on top of each other all the way back at the beginning of our conversation here. Here's the rhyme. The technique that Haman wants to use to have Xerxes carry out this execution is the same one that Pharaoh used all those years earlier. Well, let's just have the people of Persia, the good citizens, the not out group. We'll have them rise up and slaughter their neighbors. Well, they have to do it, or else I guess they receive capital punishment for not participating in this slaughter. And then even if they feel objection to it, now they're going to start morally justifying it to themselves, and they're going to try to find language to give to each other as neighbors to feel better about this absolutely horrible atrocity that they're going to be ordered to carry out. It's an extra layer of darkness and manipulation that is built into this thing. And I absolutely believe that the author of Esther is drawing on that mental imagery at the beginning of the book of Exodus, drawing on this storytelling element that rhymes with another storytelling element that has been around at this point in history for 1,000 years for the original audience. And I think the author of Esther is trying to conjure that same moral revulsion that exists in the cultural memory of the Jewish people about the specific, public, evil, mandatory, compulsory nature of Pharaoh's genocidal edict back then. You're supposed to think of that, and you're supposed to be like, wow, Haman is a genocidal villain, a hater of the Jewish people, an enemy of God's people on the same level as the wicked, deplorable Pharaoh. And just like that, Haman shoots to the top of the list of bad guys that you could think of off the top of your head in the entire narrative flow of the entire Old Testament. And I think that narrative technique of rhyming with an earlier story to build on top of that earlier story is being employed very effectively here, because we've only known Haman now for, what are we at, 11 verses? And we see, like, no, this guy is a very powerful foe. He is a very dark, very deranged foe who would be willing to do anything, to stoop to any level, to even force other people to participate in his deepest level of violent, bloodthirsty evil to accomplish the things he wants to accomplish. So I think it's pretty cool when you run into those kind of storytelling rhymes, but there's a ton of other stuff, like I said, that we got to unpack here as we move along. Real quick, though, I got something that I'm going to be unpacking for you as the week goes along. I've got a special thing coming up. I'm not going to announce right now what the special thing is. What I am going to say is that if you support the program in any way, either at patreon.com/thetmbh podcast or through Planning Center, through the website, any of that other stuff, check your email or go check the messages over there on Patreon. There is a thing that I want to get you in the loop on and that I want to give you first crack at before I make the public announcement here in a few days. So please go and check that. If you're not a supporter of the program, that is not weird at all. I'm so glad that you're here, and we're going to get everybody up to speed, and I'm going to tell everybody about this thing that I've got cooking here real soon, and I'm really excited about it and hope it proves to be a winner. And now I'm getting too close to giving things away, so I'm just going to shut up, and we're going to be done, and we're going to talk more about this horrible Haman King Xerxes situation next time around. I'm Matt. This is the 10-Minute Bible Hour Podcast. Let's do this again soon.